So I tried to pick the sayings and the chanting to emphasize the importance of names and words. Language is very, very important in Pure Land Buddhism. So I wanted to talk about today Reverend Dr. Matsumoto. This was his title of his talk at Honko last Sunday. So I'd like to speak on that again. He opened the door. He's a lawyer. And he opened the door. So now he set the precedent. Before I get started, I wanted to mention real quick that we have a new up and running OCBC YouTube channel where we're recording the Dharma talks. So it's kind of recursive. We're filming me right now explaining how to use the YouTube channel, and you could watch it on the YouTube channel. So, it's the default is it's listed in most recent, newest to oldest. So, there's Reverend Matsumoto's talk. There's the talk by the junior YB8 kids. There's my talk on Mary Poppins. So this is kind of what it looks like. And then you can get to it either on your iPhone or on the web. So I'm going to show you how I do it on my phone. But, right here, I've downloaded this little YouTube app on my phone. Right there. We even have illustrations. And then when you get to YouTube, up here at the top, there's a little icon for a spyglass where you can search. So there's the search line up here. And I have already searched for the Orange County Buddhist Church before, because I like to watch myself. And so you can type it in the first time, and then from then on, you just click on it. And then up comes everything that has to do with anything Orange, Buddhist, church. So the second one down is the OCBC logo. And then if you click on that, right there, you get, this is our channel. And so a channel is like a container of all of our videos. And so there's the YouTube channel. And we have 170, well, it says here 173 subscribers, but we're at like 175 now. So it would be really great if everybody would go and subscribe, and you'll get little emails when Dharma talks are posted. So, in a couple days, you could watch this again on your phone. And I think something wonderful happens if you get to 200 subscribers, and then something else more wonderful happens when you get to 1,000. I don't know what it is, but it's supposed to be really good. So we have 173 subscribers, and there's, you could watch, if you missed. So if you miss a Sunday, you can look it up by title, by speaker, or by date. So if you knew that you missed the 13th of January, it's right there. And then when you click on it, you get something like this at the top, and you can give it a thumbs up. You can't give it a thumbs down. And you can make positive comments below as well. And then there's some places you can go. There's home, which is where we're at now. There's videos, playlists, and channels. We have 3 playlists. There's Dharma Talks, we have 18. And then there's festivals, there's videos from the festivals, Obon and Hanamatsuri. And then the last one is I Am OCBC. That's Christine Yada. So that's where a lot of the videos will go, the movie type productions will go. Okay, so I wanted to talk about language. In Reverend Harada's class, we talked about the differences between Sanskrit, Chinese, Japanese, and English. And last night at the BEC party, Bob Bolander said he's starting to learn French now. And I said, I'm still trying to learn English. So I'm a math computer scientist. I'm not a very good speller. I have a hard time spelling. And I've read that it's innate. You're born with the talent of spelling or not, so that makes me feel good. It's not my fault. It's genetic. And then before I gave my talk, Laura Yamamoto noticed a grammatical error. It's not an name. It should have been a name. So I told her this kind of proves the whole point of my talk. English is very confusing, I think. It's difficult for me. So that should have been an A. So we're going to talk about English and Spanish. I took 3 years of Spanish in high school. I'm more confident with Spanish than I am Japanese. The Japanese talk will come later. And I had Marcia Taborga correct this for me. She's a native speaker. So I had this proofed. So the first thing I wanted to talk about the difficulties with spelling in English. The neat thing about Spanish is if you pronounce the word correctly, you will spell it correctly. There's no exceptions. There's no weird rules. So when I took high school Spanish, I never studied for Spanish spelling tests at all. I just went in and I just wrote what I heard, and I got 100% on every Spanish spelling test, but not English. So I did a Dharma class, and Howard Nakagiri was in the audience, and he said I made a spelling mistake. The Buddhist canon, where all of our sutras live, this is not the right spelling for Buddhist canon. This is a Buddhist canon. So I do this a lot. So it should have been canon. That's the Buddhist canon. And then the other thing I find frustrating about English is the question mark is at the end of the sentence. So if you have a long sentence and you're reading out loud or even to yourself, you don't know it's a question until you get to the end. So you're like, Albert Einstein discovered relativity, right? So I really like Spanish because they tell you right up front, this is a question. And I want to know that. And then the one that I find most frustrating is exclamation point. I would read this sentence as, come downstairs, the house is on fire! But that's not right. So in Spanish, I would be like, come downstairs, the house is on fire! Oh! All right. There was one fire. There was one fire. That's what I meant. There's one fire in the house. And then I really like this about Spanish a lot. The adjectives go after the noun. So it makes sense to me to say, we're going to talk about rice, and it happens to be red. So in English, we describe it, and then you still don't know what we're describing. So I think this is great. It's rice that's red versus red rice. I think that is a better order. So this is an example I found on the internet. The beautiful, long curved, old red Italian steel racing car. Racing car. So you don't know what you're talking about until the end of the sentence. So I was surfing the web and I found out there is actually a thing called adjective order in English. There's actually a rule in English about the order in which we list multiple adjectives before a noun. And I'm a computer scientist, a math person, and I really like rules a lot. But this rule is so complicated that even if you learned it and memorized it and understood it, you have no time to work this out in your head in a conversation with someone else. So this is this weird thing about language and about Buddhism. You need to kind of be aware of the rules and you need some kind of study, but you have to actually hear it enough until it becomes second nature. So like I know the order that adjectives should go in a sentence, but I've never learned this rule. It's because I've listened and spoken and it's become ingrained in me. And like Teague would say, nobody would talk like that. I mean, it just sounds odd to your ear. So I'm going to give you some easy examples. The ugly red wooden box sounds correct to a native speaker, but the wooden red ugly box, it just sounds wrong. It's not the order that we do adjectives in English. So native speakers don't know this. They just know that sounds weird. Like, that's not how you talk. So when I took Japanese, I wrote sentences that were grammatically correct, but my Japanese teacher would mark it off because she said nobody in Japan would ever say that. I think I said the traffic was heavy, and she said in Japanese you never use heavy to describe traffic. And I said, but you knew what I was saying, right? So she also said that older people like me have a hard time learning new languages, which hurt my feelings. And then she said that, she also said that mathematicians and computer science people aren't good at learning language because we only speak when we're positive, we're right, and you really have to experiment. And then the last thing she said, what was the last thing she said? She said a lot of things. Oh, the last thing she said the reason why I can't teach you Japanese grammar is because you don't even know English grammar. And I said, yeah, but I could write a compiler. So there is a rule describing the order, the proper order of English adjectives. So this is the order they're supposed to go in. You're supposed to start with opinion, like beautiful, ugly, easy. And then you're supposed to go to size, long, tall, short, big. Then you're supposed to list shape, curved, round, and then age comes forth, then color, then nationality, then material, and then purpose. They're supposed to come in this order. So that's why it's a beautiful, long, curved, old, red, Italian, steel racing car. And if you say it, if you mix those up, I tried it at home. You could try this at home. You mix these up, they sound odd, even though you don't know why. It's because you've internalized this formal rule until it's become second nature. And then, of course, because it's English, there's lots of exceptions. You should say, the old tall man read a short old story about an ugly big bear. That's following the rule. But this is an exception to the rule. I guess, well, the only one I really understood is a short story is a thing, right? A short story is an actual thing. So you can't put short old story, even though that follows the rule. So the proper way of doing this is the tall old man read an old short story about a big ugly bear. It sounds right to me. I know the rules, I don't really quite follow it, but I would get it right because I'm a native speaker. I've listened and practiced for so long that I can follow the rules without even consciously being aware of the rules. So they explained that in this case, old and short are qualifiers, not merely size or age designations, because old man is a social concept on its own, and short story is a genre. And big ugly is a commonplace term. So I don't know if that was the name of Shaquille O'Neal, the Big Ugly, but. So there is a rule, and you can learn it, but it's not possible to ever follow it. So I thought this was very interesting. There's a lot of doctrinal things in Buddhism. We need to learn them and become aware of them, but we have to listen to them enough until they become second nature and part of who we are. So I guess what I'm saying is you know a lot more about Buddhism than you think you do. I'm serious. You know a lot. You just may not know the rule or the book it's from, but I really think as a Sangha that the understanding is quite deep. And a lot of people say they like my talks because I find real world examples that I use as a metaphor to kind of explain Buddhism, but it's not a metaphor. It's exactly the same thing. It's not a metaphor. It's not like what we do. It's exactly the same process. So I don't really think spirituality and secular life are two different things. I think it's the exact same process going on. You listen to the Dharma so much that you're fluent in it. So here's our sentence again. Now this is where I went to Marcia Taborga on, because my memory was very vague, because I was 15 or 16 at the time. But I remembered this word in Spanish, solamente. And I knew that sola meant alone, and mente means mind. So in Spanish, I don't think Marcia knows this because she's a native speaker, and I asked her about it, and she did say it's true, but they don't consciously think about it. But it's in the language is communicating the way they think about it. So when you think of something only, it's because it's alone in your mind. When you have something alone in your mind, it's the only thing you're thinking about. So Spanish adverbs end in mente for mind, like ly in English. So mente is Spanish for mind. So I looked these up on the internet, and you can tell they're in alphabetical order. But, and I'm not going to pronounce these, but you can read them. But on the right, you can do things angrily. And when I was in high school, I used to think, well, I'm angry, of course, because the outside world it's the outside world's fault. It's making me angry. People are not behaving properly, and that's causing me to be angry. But literally translated, I'm doing things with an angry mind. And even in high school, I thought maybe I was a budding Buddhist, but I thought that was a really neat way of thinking about it, that the problem is coming from inside. My mind is angry, and that's why I'm doing things angrily. So it's a state of mind. So the next word is kindly, to do things with a mind that is kind. And sincerely, you have a sincere mind. And because your mind is in that state, you act it out in your everyday life. And so I really thought this was a really interesting way of thinking about emotions and feelings and how we interact with the world. And somewhere along the way, somebody decided to attach these qualities with the mind and have them be adverbs. And that really struck me when I was in high school. And I was just so happy I remembered it, relatively correctly. So I wanted to just explain the importance in language. The way the Spanish interpret these adverbs says a lot about the way they view the world and the way they interact with the world. And so the language we use, the words we use to explain and interpret Buddhism is very, very important. And it has deep relevance with us when we hear the Dharma in our native tongue. And I read a book the other day that said that, the Buddha was 35 years old and realizes enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And he sits for 49 days, kind of experiencing his awakening and kind of having this dilemma about whether he should try to teach or not, or whether anyone would understand it. And he finally gets up from the Bodhi tree and goes out into the world and gives his first Dharma talk at Deer Park, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. He puts his experience into language. And a scholar said that was the day that Pure Land Buddhism began. It's the day that the Buddha began to articulate the teachings through language and through words so that we can hear it, internalize it, and live it effortlessly as a native speaker. So I just am really impressed with words and what they mean and why we choose the words we choose to explain our teachings. It's all done with forethought and care. Every word in the sutra is selected explicitly for a reason. It's not just like willy-nilly. Every word has deep meaning. And so if they use the word path, they're referring to process. And if they refer to awakening, maybe they're referring to experience. And they do these kind of selections very carefully, just like we do when we speak to one another. We may not know the rules, but it's carrying deep meaning from our heart to others. So I'm working on one coming on the differences between Japanese and English, but for this audience, I think that's much more risky. So I decided to start with Spanish. So thank you very much. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman Doubts. Naman Doubts.